Hello everyone and welcome back to Color Scholar. Today's topic is layers and its various types. In this video, we're going to learn what layers are and we're going to go over 12 types of layers and their features. Layers are the most important tool in Photoshop because they give you the flexibility and control to achieve your creative vision. Layers were first introduced in Photoshop version 3.0 in 1994 and it completely changed image editing. For the first time, you could do complex compositions easily without having to be the channel's guru. So, layers are what allow you to stack different graphics or images or other types of editing adjustments via those layers, and they can provide a method by allowing you to creatively adjust your artwork. Again, without layers, we wouldn't be able to achieve what we can with them. Using layers while editing makes our work non-destructible, and this is because by using layers our original photo will remain intact and we can apply different kinds of adjustments and edits on top of our image without affecting its integrity. Now the other thing to know is layers are independent of one another, and another way to look at them is individual canvases. So each canvas or layer receives pixels that you add to it. So let's take an example in this image. If I create a new layer by going to this icon right here, plus icon, and apply some paint to it, for that I'm using my brush tool and I'm just painting around this image. I'm just painting randomly. It is applying the color to that new created layer and it is not affecting the layers above or below it. So when I turn this layer off by pressing on this eye icon, we can see that the paint is gone and it wasn't applied to the layers below it. So let's bring back the layer. But if I create a layer and wish to add paint to it, but I end up choosing another layer, then the paint will not be applied to it. And if I try to apply the paint, I'm applying the paint on the image itself. So it is very important that once you create a new layer to fill in the pixels, you need to select that layer. So this is just an overview of what layers are, and in this section and many more to come, we will be using layers a lot. Before we get into different types of layers and customization, let's first take a look at some options that we have inside of our layers panel. Now if you don't have your layers panel visible, you can go to Windows and select layers and you will have your layers panel. So let's take a look at some of the options available inside of our layers panel. And if we take a look at the top right corner, there's this little icon or grid, and if we click on this icon, we can get different kinds of options that we can apply to our layers. And we can do the same thing if we right click on any type of layer. We can get the same options, and most of the options are similar that we get from here. Now there is one option here that I would like to set up for my individual layers, and that is panel option. And from here you can increase or decrease the size of your thumbnail for the layer. Right now by default this is selected, but if I want to increase the size of my thumbnail, I'll just select this one and press OK, and you can see the size of my thumbnail has increased. Similarly, if I go back and choose a smaller size, you can see the size has decreased. Or if I want to remove the thumbnail altogether, I'll just click none and the thumbnails are gone. So let's revert it back to default. Now again, going back to panels option, below the thumbnail size there is thumbnail content, and by default entire document will be selected. But I'm going to show you what selecting the layers bound will do for your document. So let's go to one of the files where there are lots of layers, and let's check layer bounds is selected. When we choose layer bounds, only what is contained in the layer will show up instead of the whole document in the layer. For example, let's see. Right now in the pumpkin, the whole pumpkin is only showing up in the layer and not the whole document. So by this way, we know what is in our layer when we have a large number of layers for our project. So just keep in mind, we can use layer bounds to easily navigate between the layers. And now a quick tip for Photoshop 2020. We can zoom in on the layer content directly if we just hold Alt on our keyboard and press on the layer thumbnail we can zoom in directly onto that layer. Now if you want to edit another element, you don't have to scroll and go to that item. You can just see, let's go to crow number 2. Just select the crow number 2 and hold your alt and click on the thumbnail, and here right now directly on the crow without having to scroll all over there. So this is one of the benefit of layers bound. Now let's look at the layer panel and go through some of the important features. At the top of the layers panel, we have an option to filter by the type of layer that we have in our document. And if you go here, you can see that we have a bunch of different options. We can filter by specific name or effect, mode, attribute, color, smart object if they are used in your project, selected, and artboard. Let's try it by name. And now when we type in a specific name, then all the layers with that name will then be filtered and nothing else will be shown. For example, let's type in pumpkin, as there are lots of pumpkin in this photo. And you can see only the pumpkin layers are showing up and nothing else. So we can turn this on and off, this source option. If we go right here, you can see this red button. If we just turn it off, we can get back to our original list of layers, or we can just delete whatever we have typed in and we'll get back again. So the option below this search option is blend modes, and this option is here for blending modes, which is a type of customization that you can apply to your layers, and we will get to blending modes in detail in a separate tutorial in the series. You can also adjust the opacity and fill for your layer. At first, let's take an example right now. I've got an image right here, and if I select the layer 0 and decrease the opacity, you can see the layer that I have selected is getting transparent, and the color below, which is the teal color, is showing up. Now let's keep the opacity at 100 and let's try with fill as well. And using the fill does give the same result, and it seems at first that fill and opacity are working similar, but they're actually different when it comes to using the blending modes from here. There are 8 special blending modes right now in Photoshop, and fill and opacity respond differently to those 8 blending modes. And we will talk about them in detail when we get to the blending mode series in the upcoming videos. We can also lock individual layers from layers panel. The one that is most commonly used is lock all, which is the icon right here, which pretty much prevents you from deleting your specific layer or even moving it within the document itself. For example, with the move tool selected and my layer 0 selected as well, I can move this layer around. You can see the background color, the layer below it. But if I lock my layer 0, then I cannot move this layer. And locking layers can be handy because if you have a lot of layers and you don't want to accidentally move anything, then locking that layer is really helpful. So let's unlock this layer and let's go down to the layers panel. Here as well we have got some additional options for our individual layers. We can either link them, we can put special effects, we can add a layer mask. If we select the top layer and if I press on the layer mask, a mask will be created, and we'll talk about mask in our other videos. We can even add some adjustment layers. If we just click, suppose let's choose the labels. I have just put a labels adjustment layer above my image, and I can alter the settings. And if I want to revert back to my original image, I can just uncheck it or delete it, and my original image will be retained in its original integrity. We have options for grouping. If we select 2 layers and click on the folder icon, we can group the layers. It is helpful when you have lots of layers opened in your projects. We can even create new layer by pressing on this plus icon right here. You can see. And if we just click on this new layer icon, a new layer will be created on the top of the current layer. But if you want to create a layer below that layer, all you need to do is just hold on the control in your keyboard or command on the Mac and press on the new icon, and the new layer will be created below that layer. And at the last but not the least, this is the bin icon or delete layer icon. If we just select this layer and bring it to the bin, you can delete it, or just pressing delete on the keyboard also works. Now I'm going to show you how you can interact with layers. You can adjust them, rearrange them, move them, and even turn them on and off. And if you take a look right here, you can see a little eyeball icon, and if you click on it, it actually hides that particular layer, and then any layers that are underneath it will show up, and we can turn those on and off as well. We can also change the position of the layers that are stacked just by clicking and dragging to a new position. And we can even change the name of our layers by double clicking on the name and giving it a new name. So that's for the basics of layers and layers panels. Now let's take a look at some of the real world applications of layers. So inside our layers panel, as you can see, we have three different layers. We have a background layer, a layer 2, and a layer 3. So our background layer is also locked, which is represented by this lock icon right here. And the background layer is, well, it's a background for the rest of the layer. So we have two layers above it, and this becomes the background. So by default, whenever you open a new image or create a new document, it's going to automatically be called background for that first particular layer, and it's going to be locked. Another thing you can notice is that each layer has a thumbnail, and it represents the content of that layer, and it can also tell you the type of layer that it is. So now we are going to explore these three kinds of layers first. If you take a look to the left of the thumbnail is an icon that looks like an eye. So if we click on it, we are going to turn off the layer. We can turn on the layer again by simply clicking on the area here where the eye icon was previously. So by clicking on this icon, we can turn our layer on and off. When we turn off the background layer, we will have a transparent document because there is no content to show from any of the layer right now. So let's turn on the background layer. So our next layer, layer 2, is a text layer, and I know this based on the T icon on the thumbnail area. So anytime you see this letter T, you will know that the particular layer is a text layer or type layer. To activate this type layer, click on this empty area where the eye icon should be, and you can see my text is now showing up in the background layer. So now let's move our text within the document. For that, make sure you have your move tool selected, and you can go do that by going to tools bar and selecting move, or just pressing V on the keyboard. And please make sure that you have selected the text layer as well. Now using the move tool, let's bring our text down by just dragging the text by clicking on the mouse. Don't release the mouse button, and when you are satisfied with the position where you want to put the text, now release the mouse button, and we have moved the text to a new position. So next up, let's turn on the layer 3 as well. And you can see the text and the background below have been replaced with solid green color. This is because the layer 3 is above text and background, and always the layer above will be displayed in the document window. And this layer contains shape with a color the same size of the document, so text layer and the background layer are not showing up as they are below this layer. Now selecting the layer 3 with the move tool, if we drag this layer, then the layer below it becomes visible now. You can see now the text layer and the background layer are both visible. Now let's rearrange the layers. Click on the shape layer and drag it below the text layer. Don't release the mouse button until you see a blue line like this appearing below the text layer. You can see the blue line right here, and now when you release shape layer, now the shape layer is below the text layer. Now let's try bringing this layer below the background layer, and you can see it is not allowing you to do that because our background layer is currently locked, and it should be the background for the entire document. So you can't rearrange the background layer. But if you want to rearrange the background layer, first of all you will need to unlock the layer, and to do that, just double click on the background layer, give it a name, and press OK. And now the lock icon is gone, and if you try to bring your shape layer below the background layer, now you can do that. Or alternatively, you can see the lock icon right here, and if you just press on this lock icon, your layer will be unlocked, and you can simply bring that shape layer down. So these are some of the examples of layers that you can use in real world. I will be showing you more of such examples regarding layers in my upcoming videos. So now let's take a quick look at the different types of layers in Photoshop. There are 12 different types of layers, and you are going to use some a lot more than others depending on the type of work that you do and your workflow. But some of these layer types you are going to use on every single project, and background layer is one of them. Background layer is always located at the bottom and always comes locked automatically, and there are limitations on what you can do with this layer. We cannot move it or rearrange it. We can't delete it. The sole purpose of this layer is, well, it's the background of your document. The second type of layer is grouped layer, and grouped layers are used to help you manage and organize your layers in groups. And then within the group layer, you can add any type of layers. So you can put group layers and other group layers as many times as you want based on how you want to organize all those different layers. And believe me, when you are working on a project and you have hundreds of layers, it is nice to organize them into groups to make it easier to locate specific layers. The next most common type of layer is pixel layer. And if you are a photographer or an artist or a painter, then you're going to use a pixel layer a lot. And this is an example of pixel layer. In this layer, an image has been put, and pixel layer contains the pixels of an image, so this is a pixel layer. So pixel layer basically allows you to add pixels to that layer. The next layer type is vector layer, and it is the opposite of pixel layer, and it is indicated by this icon. Vectors are not necessarily pixels, but a graphic file that you can resize without the loss of quality, whereas in pixel graphic you are going to lose the quality as you resize the image. So a vector layer is one in which you create shapes. For example, if I select a rectangle shape and create a shape, you can see I have created a vector layer, and I can know that by looking at this icon that indicates the vector layer. You can even create vector layer using pen tool, or maybe you can add another document created in vector programs like Adobe Illustrator, where you can have that particular type of document added as a vector layer as well. The next type of layer is called type layer. When you add text in a document, you end up with the type layer, and it is represented by the letter T in the thumbnail of that layer. If I activate this, the T in the thumbnail indicates this is the type layer. You can change the type layer into a pixel layer by right-clicking on the layer and selecting rasterize type, and now the layer will become a pixel layer. The sixth layer is called a fill layer, and you can access the fill layer by going to layers and new fill layer. This type of layer allows you to create a layer with solid color, for example, or a gradient of a color, or pattern. So in a way it is similar to a pixel layer in that it is adding pixels of color to that particular layer. This next type of layer is one of my favorite layers, known as adjustment layer. So adjustment layers allow you to work non-destructively, so you don't have to work on the background layer of your original image. So let's take a quick look at it. So here we have an image on a pixel layer, and then if we want to edit this particular image in a certain way, and I apply an adjustment to this image, let's say black and white, it's being applied to a specific layer. So if I close this file, if I save this file and close it, and I open it again maybe tomorrow or after a couple of days, and I want to change it back to the original image, because maybe I converted it to black and white and now I want the colors back, it's too late because I worked destructively. So instead we want to use adjustment layers, and if you apply a black and white layer, the edit is separate from the pixel layer. And if I save this file as a PNG, let's save it, and come back tomorrow or next week, and I open this file again, I can go back to the original color image, because now I can turn off this adjustment layer or just delete it. So that's working non-destructively, and we are going to do a lot more of this type of editing in future videos. So another important type of layer is smart object layer. A smart object layer can either be an image or graphic, and it contains additional information inside of the layer itself that allows you to edit the content of that specific layer. So right now we have a layer that is considered a smart object right here, and we have a little icon right here that shows you that this is indeed a smart object. So anytime you see this icon, you will know it's a smart object. So if you have a smart object and you want to edit the additional content or information inside of that smart object, double click on the icon right here, and then a new tab or a window will open showing you the content inside of that smart object. And you can see for this image 2 adjustment layers have been applied, and if we apply one more adjustment layer, let's say color lookup, let's choose any fall colors and we save it, our smart object will be updated. The main benefit of smart object is when your image is smart object, resizing it larger or smaller won't affect its pixel. You can even apply filters to smart object, and once you do, you can go back and change the values, which is not possible with regular pixel layers. So the next type of layer is called linked smart object, and it is denoted by this icon. Our original smart object and linked smart object work in the same way. There's content inside of this linked smart object that we can edit by double clicking on the icon. Now the difference is that the first type of smart object, the content and the information are embedded in the document that you are working on. But a linked smart object is a type of smart object that is not embedded in the document but is linked to the original file of your hard drive. So if you try to edit this type of smart object and you don't have the original file in your hard drive, you cannot edit the content. Now the 10th type of layer is also a kind of smart object layer, and it is called clouds layer. And in this type of layer, the smart object is the one that is linked to the cloud of your Creative Cloud account. So again, you can edit the smart object if you have this particular file available in your Creative Cloud account. So smart object, linked smart object and cloud layers are all similar type of smart objects. The only difference is for smart objects, content or the images will be embedded in a document. For linked smart object, it should be on the hard drive of your system. And for the cloud layers, your image should be within your Creative Cloud account. The next one is called frame layers. So anytime you use the frame tool and you add a frame, which is simply a placeholder for an image or graphics or even type, you will notice a little icon in the bottom right corner right here that looks like this and lets you know that it's a frame layer. Now the another most commonly used and the last type of layer is layer mask. So a layer mask can be added from down here, you can see the icon, and once you add it to your image or to your adjustment layer or other types of layer, you can precisely control how a specific edit is being applied to that pixel layer, so it gives you the precision and control of your creative vision. For example, I've got a couple of boxes, and if I select these boxes and apply the layer mask by just clicking on this layer mask icon, you can see only the boxes are visible. And let's do one thing, let's keep the background. Now if I want to change the color of the boxes using hue saturation, you can see I'm only changing the color of the boxes and not the whole background. So instead of adding an adjustment or edit to your entire document, you can specify exactly where you want to place that specific edit. Within the layer mask, you will be able to use white and black and shades of gray only. The white makes the effects and adjustment visible to your image, whereas black prevents the effects from happening. As you can see in this layer mask, if I press Alt and click on the layer mask, the blacks are those that are not visible and whites are those that are visible. This concludes our basic layer and layer types. So that's it for this tutorial. I hope you learned something new, and if you did, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Thanks again for watching. I hope to see you back for some more. See you next time on Color Scholar.